Hello viewers. The subject for our next video on controversial scientists is Hu Jiankui, the scientist who edited human babies. Fascinating, isn't it? Let's explore. In 2018, the future of humanity seemed to arrive all at once, and not everyone was ready for it. A scientist stood before the world and claimed that he had created the first genetically edited human babies, not in theory, not as an experiment that stopped in a lab, but as living, breathing children. Wow! His name was He Jiankui, and within days he became one of the most controversial figures in modern science. To understand what he did, we need to know about the tool he used. CRISPR is often described as genetic scissors. It allows scientists to cut and modify DNA with extraordinary precision. For years, it has been seen as one of the most promising breakthroughs in medicine, offering the possibility of curbing genetic diseases and transforming human health. But there is a difference between treating a disease and rewriting human life before it even begins. He Jiankui chose to cross that line. His experiment focused on a gene called CCR5, which is linked to the way HIV enters human cells. By disabling this gene, he believed he could make individuals resistant to the virus. It was an ambitious idea, one that seemed to promise protection against a life threatening illness. So, he moved forward. He edited the embryos of twin girls using CRISPR technology. These embryos were then implanted, and months later, the twins were born. According to him, they were healthy, and their DNA had been successfully altered. It was a moment that could have been celebrated as a scientific milestone, but it wasn't, because almost immediately the scientific community reacted with shock and condemnation. Researchers, bioethicists, and institutions spoke out against what he had done, not because gene editing itself was even impossible or even undesirable, but because of how and why it had been done. There were safer alternatives available to prevent HIV transmission. The procedure was not medically necessary. The risks of CRISPR, including unintended genetic mutations, were still not fully understood. And perhaps most worrying of all, the experiment had been conducted in secrecy without proper ethical oversight. This was not just innovation, it was a gamble with human lives and with future generations. Because the changes made to these embryos were not temporary, they were permanent and they could be passed on. What had been altered in these two children could shape the genetic future of their descendants. This is what made this moment so significant and so dangerous. The consequences came quickly. Authorities intervened, investigations were launched, and within a year, He Jiankui was sentenced to prison. His work was condemned, his career collapsed, and his experiment was halted. But the impact of what he had done did not disappear. Instead, it left the world with a question that still has no simple answer. How far should science go? Because the truth is, the technology he used is not going away. It is improving, it is becoming more precise, more controlled, and more accessible. The possibility of editing human DNA is no longer theoretical, it is real. And that brings us to something important, especially for students. This story is not just about science, it is about how we think, how we argue, and how we evaluate complex issues. It is about weighing evidence, considering human ethical implications, and understanding multiple perspectives. In many ways, it is exactly the kind of case that appears in research. It forces us to ask difficult questions. Was the intention justified? Were the risks acceptable? Who gets to decide what is ethical? And what happens when progress moves faster than regulation? These are not simple questions, and they do not have simple answers because strong arguments are not built on certainty. They are built on analysis, evidence, and the ability to see both sides of an issue. In the end, the story of He Jiankui is not about one scientist or one experiment. It is about a turning point, a moment when humanity realized that now it has the power to reshape its own biology. The question is no longer whether we gain, it is whether we should. And if we decide that we should, then how do we ensure that we do it responsibly? Because the next breakthrough may not come with mistakes. It may come with success, and when it does, the choices we make will define the future of human life itself. Keep seeing our videos and subscribe to our channel for interesting information every week. Bring science and education back to your lives.